Hi, I'm Penny Rabiger. I'm an ex-teacher, mother of teenagers, and for the last 15 years I've been working with a variety of education organisations, from social enterprises to charities and startups. I'm a restless activist, committed to making change happen, while knowing full well it's a lot like sweeping in a sandstorm most days. I've been thinking about the concept of beyond Black Lives Matter and what this might mean. How do we go beyond? Black Lives Matter isn't new, and yet it shot to global attention following the brutal murder of George Floyd by police in the USA. There's a long history of Black people being killed at the hands of the state in every part of the world. But until recently, it seemed that the physical, geographical borders between us had prevented our interconnected struggles from meeting. Social media changed this. Seeing the images of brutality and hearing human stories of oppression, violence, discrimination at every level have become more accessible to all, for better and for worse. One of the things that this whole situation highlighted was the power of human stories to touch others. One thing that schools seem to be doing is asking staff to tell their stories as a result of the Black Lives Matter movement. Schools that saw themselves as community hubs, inclusive, vibrant and diverse, have been shocked by the stories told by staff, students and their families. But it perhaps has helped them to reframe their understanding of racism in a system obsessed with logging incidents of racist name-calling as evidence of racism. The lens is shifted to concepts that many white people have probably never even had to think about before. The way people are treated during recruitment processes, for example, a look, a comment, a policy and a process that seemed normal once they're reflected back, and there's a shift of understanding towards seeing that systemic racism is enacted in subtle and not so subtle othering of people of colour. Setting out the norm and the standard as white, heterosexual and male is what UK society offers as its baseline. Anything that deviates from this is, well, other. My work with Lifter helps teachers and students to access human stories from around the world, with the aim of rehumanizing diversity without that othering lens. It's a simple but beautiful platform that allows teachers to take their children on virtual school trips, if you like, around the world through immersive, interactive documentary story worlds where they can explore, click on things that they see and learn about them, and meet ordinary people who tell a little slice of their life. Knowing a little about people who we may otherwise not have the opportunity to meet goes a long way to ensuring that empathy and compassion are the ways that we meet with the world. Many of us don't know anyone who isn't just like us, so this is a way to make sure that we aren't limited to our own frame of reference. Whether we go to a school and work in diverse London or in the Outer Hebrides for that matter. The other part of my work is the BAMEed Network. We're a grassroots movement run entirely by volunteers, and our mission in very broad terms is to ensure that our education workforce represents the diversity of our modern world. We work with teachers, leaders, major organisations like multi-academy trusts, the Department for Education, unions, and so on. This work with the Baymed Network and with Lifter gives tangible tools to push beyond the initial declarations of solidarity, outrage, shock, and consternation that ensued with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. It's galvanizing to see this surge across the globe, but when the performative declarations subside, what's left? If we're moving towards change, reform, equity and justice, we need to be held to a higher standard than posting on social media. It needs to include real action, to dismantle systemic racism. And this is harder to do. It requires behind the scenes, away from screens, consistent and unglamorous work that doesn't boil down to a phrase or a picture or even a moment in time. It's work that never ends, and that makes it far less attractive to the social media thumb scrollers. A lot of our work with the Baymed Network recently has been a surge of anxious school leaders, those multi-academy trusts, the teachers, unions, major education organisations, all reeling from the shock and asking, but what can we do? And that is what sorts the sheep from the goats. We can see the ones that have posted their Black Lives Matter statement and returned to business as usual. We can see the ones that have engaged with staff and the community in an initial listening exercise, which has left people of colour with a feeling of repeated trauma as they bare their souls with the anticipation of working together for change, and instead nothing. Dialogue with colleagues at the peak of outrage in the wake of George Floyd's murder often culminated in that question, what can I do? The key to what we can do is to start to understand what systemic racism is, and to understand how violence is enacted on Black bodies at every level, including the outright physical acts of violence expressed in a knee to the neck, and also violence that we ourselves inflict through going about our daily business, thinking of ourselves as good citizens, as good teachers, as good neighbours. So going beyond Black Lives Matter is about bringing Black Lives Matter in as a core part of your practice. It's about making the move from being not racist to being actively anti-racist. The first step should be learning, unlearning, educating ourselves and undoing the education we've received when it comes to race, racism, systemic and institutional racism. The word whiteness is used a lot in the context of race and racism, and whiteness isn't about skin colour. Whiteness is about the systems and the institutions that we need to dismantle and reconstruct. If it helps, I always say, just because I'm a woman doesn't mean I know anything about feminism and structural sexism that's baked into our society, our institutions, education, workplaces at every level. It doesn't mean that as a woman I act to elevate my sisters, or that I don't embody sexist language to my daughters, or practice oppressive acts every day. We all need to understand whiteness in this way as a system, and we need to understand how we ourselves uphold it. We all need to learn to identify and work towards dismantling systemic racism wherever it lurks. And it lurks in our education system, in the recruitment practices we use, in teacher standards, performance management. It's there in school behaviour policies, attendance and exclusion of students, policies and practices around hair, the way we dress, speech, for staff and students alike. It's there in the curriculum through what is and isn't included. It's there in our relationships with children, their families, between children, between teachers, in the staff room. There is a lot to do to move beyond #Black Lives Matter. Teaching, after all, is a political act within a system that we may not have created ourselves, but that we can recreate differently. So I guess now we all need to find our own path and our own allies on our journey beyond Black Lives Matter.